Hello and welcome to our talk, Exploring Constructionist Pathways for Generative AI in Education. I'm Gretchen Larsen, and my colleagues Justin Olmanson and Azadeh Hassani are here with me in this space. We're excited to be here and glad to be able to present our research here at EdMedia 2025. Um, Okay, getting started. This presentation is part of a larger set of studies, all centered around the same core course and group of students. Together with Justin and Azadeh, we've contributed to several companion papers. We've together put together this group of papers that are all focused on supporting novice programmers with AI interfaces. Others exploring how students learn computational thinking through prototyping. Each paper really highlights a different facet of this learning environment, but all share the same constructionist foundation. Yeah, so in this study, we explored how students in a graduate level course engaged with generative AI through a constructionist learning design. They encountered AI not just as a tool to use, but a cultural object to critique, a learning technology to engage with, and a creative material to build with. Um, our goal was to understand how this multifaceted, layered engagement shaped student learning and design processes. In today's talk, I'll walk through the context of the course, our research design, and then share our key findings and discussion and implications. So even if you don't plan to or want to be a technology designer, engaging in both design and development practices supports students as they learn learning design, curriculum design, and technology processes. To that end, um, the Innovative Learning Technologies PhD, EDD, and master's programs at the University of Nebraska offer a design and development pathway. In these courses, students learn by constructing understanding via the development of learning technology of their own design. One of these courses is titled Data and AI in the Design of Learning, and it is from a section of this course that this study is based. In this course, students learn a range of AI tools and techniques, as well as the history and present impact of AI on education. To facilitate that engagement over the weekly technical content, students also learn Python programming. Students who already know JavaScript, PHP, or another language are welcome to use what they already know. And the class is really multi-level. So some students have no programming experience and some students have a lot. Each week of the course, there are two main components that make up the curriculum. There's a cultural situated exploration and a technical practice. In the cultural portion of the course, students engage with readings and media topics like AI in education, computational thinking, machine learning, and creative coding. In the technical portion, students expand their Python skills by experimenting with AI tools and libraries, including OpenCV, WordNet, TensorFlow, often applying what they're exploring. Python was really the connective tissue across the technical activities that allowed students to prototype projects with generative AI. Um, Students engaged in hands-on constructionist learning process where they explored generative AI both conceptually and technically. They weren't just learning about AI, they were learning with it. Over the semester, they designed and built their own educational technology prototypes using generative AI as both a learning tool and a creative material. The process was iterative and reflective, and students grounded those complex ideas in personally meaningful, technically driven projects that embodied their evolving understanding of AI in education. To document their learning experiences, both the technical and the cultural learning, students created weekly slides in a shared Google slide deck. On the slide, students collage screenshots of their technical practice, quotes from readings, images from videos, and sometimes journal-style reflections. In this paper, we explored a multifaceted constructionist approach for generative AI in education, where generative AI serves as a as a generator of creative material, a learning technology, and a cultural object, a technology so popular that it influences the society for which it was designed. Through this research, we sought to better understand the dynamics of how educators, educational technology researchers, and programmers use generative AI in the support of constructionist learning design. Now we'll speak a bit about methods. Qualitative ethnographic methods such as observation, interviews, and artifact analysis were combined with analytical approaches like grounded theory, and are known to be especially valuable for exploring wide-ranging questions about students' lived experiences as they learn to code and prototype with the support of generative AI. In this study, 7 students agreed to participate. While a sample size of 12 or greater is preferred, 6 or more participants are appropriate for grounded theory, particularly when there's a focus on achieving data saturation through multiple data sources and participant perspectives. Our analysis followed a multi-step iterative process. First, we open-coded interviews, class field notes, project presentations, prototype code bases, and weekly course artifacts. Justin generated the initial set of codes, Azaday reviewed and expanded them, leading to over 900 unique codes. At the same time, I used pattern coding across the field notes to identify recurring themes. We then brought these codes and themes together in weekly meetings to build a shared organizational framework. The goal wasn't generalizability, but depth and contextual insight, surfacing how students engage with AI across the different dimensions of the course, the technical, conceptual, and personal. In the next section, I'll share our key findings organized around the 3 core roles that generative AI played in the course. Generative AI as a cultural object in the course, as an interactive learning technology, and as a creative medium and material generator. Okay, so for the first part of our findings, generative AI is a cultural object. We saw students critically engaging with AI in this way. They raised questions about what distinguishes human intelligence from machine logic and reflected on issues like intentionality and values. These weren't just technical discussions, they were philosophical and ethical. Jasmine, for example, emphasized that a machine could never replicate the human act of deciding what to do. Students also critiqued AI's role in shaping educational environments. Technologies like Affectiva and Minerva sparked debate about surveillance, personalization, and power. Barry criticized question tools designed for people with disabilities that were designed for people with disabilities, but were made without input from people with disabilities, highlighting how student critique moved beyond function to the politics of design itself. Next, generative AI is an interactive learning technology. We saw AI take on a more practical role as a learning partner in the course. At first, many students were skeptical of using generative AI in their learning processes. They preferred to lean on familiar tools like Google or peers, but over time they began turning to AI when they were stuck or needed another perspective. One student described generative AI tools like ChatGPT as their Obi-Wan Kenobi, not their go-to, but a guide or support when all else failed. As students grew more comfortable, AI became a thoughtful partner. Jasmine used ChatGPT to comment on her code, and Anne found it easier to articulate questions to ChatGPT than to Google. This highlights how AI helped bridge knowledge gaps, especially when students didn't know exactly what they were looking for. Finally, students used AI as a material generator, as a way to write and modify code for their prototypes. Advanced coders used it to speed up tedious tasks, while novices often pasted in large blocks of code just to see what worked. Barry described this as, quote, seeing what stuck, which really captured the trial and error approach that many students adopted. But this approach had limits. Without a strong foundation in Python or HTML, it was hard for some students to understand or modify AI-generated code. We found that once students gained more technical fluency, they could use AI more effectively, not just to generate code, but to build something they actually understood and could take ownership of. Okay, so now that I've walked through what we observed in terms of student experiences, I want to shift into the discussion where we start to make sense of what this all means. Um, so our students critically examined what distinguishes human from machine intelligence. Um, it wasn't just philosophical discussions that they had, it also shaped how they viewed their own role in designing with AI. Um, Students recognize that although AI can generate content, it doesn't choose what's worth doing, and that decision making was something that students really claimed for themselves as they worked on their prototypes. In terms of learning to learn with generative AI, this course wasn't just about using AI, but learning how to learn with it. Students integrated generative AI tools in small but personal ways to debug, to understand syntax, to finish tasks. They didn't always trust it, but as their understanding grew, so did their ability to use it effectively. And those small shifts reflect a bigger learning process. Students didn't just use AI to learn things, um, to learn about learning. They also used AI to build their projects. They built their understanding through the act of making with AI. For beginners, this process was sometimes overwhelming, but over time, all students developed strategies to test, integrate, and take notes on, annotate generated code. Advanced students were generally more selective um, about how they used it and preferred to outsource only what they already fully understood. But this distinction really speaks to the importance of computational literacies and points to bigger questions about how much code students need to know in order to make effective use of generative tools. Across all three roles that generative AI served in our constructionist learning design, where it served as a cultural object, a learning partner, and a creative material, what emerged was this picture of students who were actively negotiating their relationship with AI. Students questioned the limits of AI, they learned to work with it, and they used it to push their thinking and correspondingly their making or the projects, the things that they made. Through this design, it wasn't a passive use, a passive integration of generative AI tools, but it was a critical and reflective engagement. Learning with AI means developing judgment and navigating uncertainty, at the same time staying connected to your own goals and intentions. And constructionist learning design is a key tool that educators can use to facilitate those broader learning aims. For just broad implications, a clear takeaway is that learning with AI is more than mastering a tool. It's it cuts more deeply to how students think, reflect, and create with that tool. And the constructionist approach helps students see themselves not just as users, but as co-creators. So if we want AI to support deeper learning, we have to design learning experiences that honor students' agency, creativity, and critique. Implications specifically for educators. For educators, this means creating opportunities and designing learning experiences that invite students to lead and not just follow. It involves introducing AI early and across all phases of creative work and really being thoughtful about designing learning experiences that resist automation. Creating opportunities that aren't about writing perfect code, but helping students to make meaningful things, reflect on that process, and to grow as critical makers. Implications for students are that primarily the most powerful learning came not from AI, but from how they learn to think with and through AI, um, developing your own strategies and reflecting on your own process, and then becoming more confident in navigating that ambiguity. That's the kind of learning that lasts, um, learning that centers the learner's own sense of purpose and intention, and harnessing their judgment to um, make creative work that works even in unknown spaces. This course, it didn't just try to teach students how to use AI. It asked and created space for students to figure out what they wanted to do with it. And that shift from designing learning experiences where students are more passive users to intentional makers is where we need to be in the era of learning with generative AI. Thank you so much for listening to this talk, and we'd love to hear from you. Please get in touch.